Hello, and welcome to DC Appleseed's virtual gala. My name is Opera Wara, Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy at DC Water, and a proud member of DC Appleseed's board.
And I'm Karen Hardwick, Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Washington Gas, and DC Appleseed's newest board member.
We would like to thank all of our sponsors for making this evening possible, especially our underwriting sponsor, Covington and Burling. Covington is not only a lead sponsor for tonight's gala, but as you will hear later, Covington has been a key player in our long-standing work with Care First.
All of your support has helped advance the work of DC Appleseed and has helped make the District of Columbia a better place to live and work.
This year has seen important milestones for DC Appleseed on 3 of our long-standing projects. Later, we will hear from Director Tommy Wells about the cleanup of the Anacostia and from Congressman Jamie Raskin on DC democracy.
But first, we are so pleased to introduce DC Council Member from Ward 3, DC Appleseed friend, and longtime champion, Councilmember Mary Che, who will tell you all about our settlement with Care First and the story of our long fight to improve health care in the district. To her great credit, Mary introduced the law that required Care First to be held accountable to its nonprofit mission here in the district. And she also supported DC Appleseed's long efforts both before the DC Insurance Commissioner and before the DC Court of Appeals to make sure the law was fairly implemented. Mary will have a conversation about this achievement with 3 of our DC Appleseed board members who have worked on this issue for over 12 years and whose persistence and commitment have made possible the production of millions of dollars to address healthcare needs in the district. So DC Appleseed thanks both Councilmember Che as well as Maria Luisa Galozzi, a partner at Covington and Burling, Richard Herzog, a partner at Harkins Cunningham, and Deborah Chalet, a principal at Mathematica Policy Research. So it's now my pleasure to turn the program over to Councilmember Che.
Today we want to tell you a story about how a little nonprofit was able to achieve transformative change for community health in the district. It took years of effort and commitment to do that. I want to thank Walter Smith and DC Appleseed and its pro bono partners for their long commitment to holding Care First to its nonprofit responsibility to commit its excessive surplus to benefit DC residents. And I want to thank the mayor for helping bring this matter to a resolution this year. 3 DC Appleseed board members were critical to this work, and they're here today to help us understand what DC Appleseed did and why, and what the impact will be. I'm happy to introduce, starting from my left, Richard Herzog of Harkins Cunningham, Maria Luisa Galozzi of Covington and Burling, and Deborah Chalet of Mathematica. They all worked pro bono for more than 12 years to help enact a new law in 2009 and then to ensure that it was implemented. The story begins actually 20 years ago when Care First sought to go public, taking along its DC affiliate chartered as charitable and benevolent organization. Appleseed successfully opposed that conversion, but more was needed to ensure that Care First DC affiliate met its charitable and benevolent obligations to the community that it serves. That led DC Appleseed to develop a legislative proposal to address the problem, resulting in the new law in 2009. Appleseed worked with me to develop and pass the law, and it provides the basis for new health benefits for district residents. So now I want to begin a conversation with our panelists. And my first is to you, Richard. What do you see as the purpose of the 2009 law? Why were you and DC Appleseed willing to work so long to implement it?
Well, the purpose of the 2009 law centers on the very special nature of Care First's subsidiary in the District of Columbia, which is known as GHMSI. GHMSI is a health insurer, and it has an obligation to maintain assets that are amply sufficient to pay the claims of its subscribers and with a large cushion to cover uncertainty. But this is a very particular kind of health insurer. Its charter defines it as a nonprofit corporation and also as a charitable and benevolent organization. We determined early on, our team, that the company's ability to accumulate assets over and above its obligation to subscribers was limited by that charitable and benevolent language. So it was the company's own charter that prompted us to examine whether some portion of its surplus was more than sufficient so that it could be devoted to public health needs in the district without impairing the financial soundness of the company. The law that you and we developed in 2009 dealt with that issue in a very careful and balanced way. It focused on the company's surplus, which is its assets over and above its liabilities and over and above the dedicated reserves that it holds to pay the claims of subscribers. And the law focused on a concept of excessive surplus, which it defined as that portion of its surplus that was more than necessary to ensure the financial soundness and efficiency of the company. It's really important to underscore that it is only the excessive surplus that is to be dedicated to community health or public health in the district. The company's community health obligation begins only when its obligation to subscribers is entirely secure. Speaking as a litigator, I believe that that sense of balance, that sense of limits that was baked into the statute played a really important role in our successes in the DC Court of Appeals. As to your second question, DC Appleseed, this team, and I were willing to work so long to get this statute implemented because, as Deborah will describe, unmet public health needs in the district are a major issue. And helping to meet those needs was a major priority of DC Appleseed when all this began. It remains a major priority of DC Appleseed today. We never thought that it would take 12 years, 2 major complex proceedings before the DC Insurance Commissioner, 2 trips to DC's highest court, but the effort was worth it.
Well, I guess, my involvement probably predates that because when I was first elected to office, I don't think I was in a day before Walter Smith was in my office telling me that we needed a law. And so that began it for me, even though the story even goes further back. Maria Luisa, can I ask you, what were the main steps that your firm needed to take to get the law implemented and ultimately reach a settlement?
Well, that depends on how much time you have.
But we don't have to have every step.
All right, so I'll give you the high level, which is, of course, as we've just been talking about, there was the passage of the statute back in 2009. And then there was the initial proceeding before the agency that regulated the insurer in which we participated. And in that initial proceeding, there was a finding of no excess surplus, which we appealed to the DC Court of Appeals. And on remand, and we won, and that went back down after a finding that the agency had not really applied the statute as written. Went back down to the agency, and as Richard was telling you, resulted in a second proceeding that resulted in a finding of $51 million of excess surplus that was attributable to the district. And we took that up on appeal as well. And the DC Court of Appeals sent that back down for consideration of a number of other issues that had not been addressed or fully explained by the regulator. And then the matter sat for a while with the agency at that point. So After about a year, we then asked the DC Court of Appeals to direct the agency to act, and we were proceeding to get ready for a further administrative proceeding, but also asked the agency to order the parties into mediation. And the combination of that, and with the assistance of the mayor, we were able to achieve this order that hopefully will soon bring a substantial amount of assistance into DC very soon.
Well, let me ask you this. I was saying you didn't have to tell us every step, but this is actually, a phenomenal story about how DC Appleseed and its pro bono partners were prepared for the long haul. I imagine that there were times when folks figured, well, we'll just drag this out and they'll go away. But you didn't go away. And all of these obstacles that were in the way. So actually, could you just say a little bit more about the steps you took to make all this happen?
Well, I think in addition to the chronological steps that we were just talking about, there were sort of 4 themes that run through what we were doing. The first 2 are really micro, and the last 2 are sort of macro. The first 2 are data-driven advocacy, and we had the benefit of our actuary, Mark Shaw, and our healthcare economist, Deborah Chalet, so that we were able to build a model that would enable us to evaluate the assets that were being set aside for potential risks, including, for example, things like a pandemic. And so that we were able to actually come from a data-driven point to be able to assess the positions that were being taken by the agency and by GIMSI. The second piece of that is that we combined this data-driven advocacy with really legal analysis and strategic advocacy. And there were a number of people that I need to mention in this. And so we'll start out with Richard, of course. Richard and Walter had an encyclopedic knowledge of this record, and which was really, as you can imagine, after a number of years and a number of proceedings, a voluminous thing to get your arms around. And they were able, in the first proceeding, to point out the ways in which the agency really had not followed the statute. And then in the second proceeding, they were able to show the ways in which the agency had not explained its determination as is required by law. And so they brought to that really a tremendous knowledge of the facts, but also a deep knowledge of administrative and appellate law and procedure. We also, then I have to mention my colleagues who were a tremendous assistance in this. And Brad Irvin was our master brief writer, and he could take all of these dense material and transform it really in a very short amount of time to persuasive and cogent advocacy. And we also benefited from my colleague Beth Brinkman, a Supreme Court advocate, who helped us really shape these arguments into what they were. And Walter then took this final package and argued these cases himself before the DC Court of Appeals both times. And those were masterful arguments to watch, and we were privileged to be there to see it. But those are sort of the micro, how we handle the cases. On the macro level, there were 2 other big picture items that I thought we should mention. And one of those is the question of standing, which is more on the arcane legal side. But the basic point is that we're dealing with a statute that involves a regulator's determination about a regulated entity's compliance. And we had been involved all along with the public policy and legislative aspects of it, but we had to convince the court that as between the regulator and the regulated entity, that we, Appleseed, had a right to be heard on the determinations that the regulator was making with respect to the regulated entity. And we did. But if we hadn't been able to do that, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. And then stepping out one level further is the board, which we've mentioned before. This was, as you have described, such a long-term big undertaking that the board of Appleseed could reasonably have decided that this was too big, too complicated, too long, too resource intensive for a small organization to take on. But they never wavered. And they were steadfast in their support for what we were doing and for the pro bono partners that were working together on this matter. And the result is that we were together able to achieve something important for the people of the District of Columbia. So we were all very happy to have been involved in it.
And Deborah, can you talk a little bit about how your part of this was integrated with everyone else's? And we're underscoring again how important it was to have the data and the information, because when you're told that, no, our excessive surplus is only X, how do you fight against that unless you have some convincing data and way to present to a court that that might not be the right figure?
Well, we've had, as Maria Louisa said, our actuary who built models to estimate, in the worst case, how much surplus was needed. And those arguments were very persuasive. We also have information from the Department of Insurance that's collected on every insurer so we can compare. But I think, as Richard said, what motivated us was this public health need that really needed to be addressed with funds that might become available if the surplus is deemed excess, and it was. In 2 cases, remanded back to the insurance commissioner. The argument that the surplus was excess was found persuasive. So we were focused on the end result. We were focused on the public health need, and as Richard said at the beginning, the charitable and benevolent obligation of GHMSI.
How difficult was it to model what would be above and beyond what the insurance company could possibly need for even the most, unexpected contingencies?
Well, these models exist, and CareFirst has its model, and as Richard said, we essentially replicated that model to find what assumptions drove the result that CareFirst was presenting before the Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking. So it is a skill to develop these models, but certainly not impossible. We were able to replicate the CareFirst model. We were able to alter the assumptions in ways that we thought were more reasonable and realistic. And we came up with a very different result about how much surplus the company needed.
And given all the work that all of you have done, amazing work, long term, I'm struck by your observations about how you were driven by what you knew about the health needs of the residents of the District of Columbia, because you had to keep the end game in view, to have the stick-to-itiveness and the commitment. And before we part, does anybody want to talk about that and what kept you going?
Well, I'd be happy to start the conversation. The district does a very good job of giving people access to healthcare services. But we have some huge challenges with respect to the health status of DC residents. And at some point, health status drives use of health services, and health services is a stopgap against that underlying need for services. Let me give you some examples of these needs. We have a crisis in maternal and child health in DC. Children in DC, infants in DC, are 21% more likely than the national average to die in the first month of life. In wards 5, 7, and 8, children are up to 6 times more likely, infants are up to 6 times more likely to die in the first month of life compared to infants born to mothers in other wards of DC. So we have some very isolated crisis situations in the city, and the mayor and the council have tried to begin to address those issues. We have a problem with children having high rates. About a quarter of children in DC are reported to have an emotional, behavioral, or just developmental disability. That would include things like ADHD, anxiety, depression. But only about 2/3 of those children ever get referred and are treated for those conditions in DC. So that's a pretty low rate of successful treatment, or at least reaching treatment. A third of our children are clinically obese. We still have children with acute asthma in emergency rooms in DC with uncontrolled chronic asthma.
So the need is great.
The need is great.
Across the board.
That's right. Violence is an issue, and violence is a public health issue. We have other behavior-related conditions, for example, HIV, infection, and accidental overdose of drugs that are a major cause of early death especially among Black men and boys in DC.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, because some people may not appreciate how dire the need is and how important this kind of effort was. Maria, in view of the extensive health needs that Deborah has pointed out here in the District of Columbia, could you just tell us how your efforts went from a beginning to an end and what the changes were over time?
I'll give you the short version of this time. We started at the outset with the company's position that there was no excess surplus. And over time, after the second proceeding before the agency came to a determination that there was $51 million of excess surplus that was attributable to the district. And that was, of course, something that we appealed. And then as we were preparing for a third administrative proceeding following the remand and potentially another appeal, we had a mediation and we had some discussions facilitated by the mayor that led to a settlement that is valued at $95 million. There are a few more steps left toward the implementation of it, but that's where we ended up.
$95 million for the health needs of the District of Columbia. That's amazing. It's really amazing. And so I'd like to thank personally each of you and obviously DC Appleseed on behalf of the District of Columbia. We're really grateful for everything that you've done. And we wanted to give the people viewing this a chance to think about the sense of strategic vision and creativity that was involved in achieving this amazing success. The legal, actuarial, healthcare, and economic expertise that were essential to achieving this result, and the commitment from DC Appleseed and its pro bono partners that were needed to see it through over this long haul. And I think the DC Court of Appeals, I have a quote here, described it well in referring to Appleseed's, quote, dogged and concrete work to promote public health in the District of Columbia. This case teaches us that transformative change can be accomplished in substantial part through the efforts of a dogged little nonprofit under the leadership of the most optimistic person I know, Walter Smith. And I'm grateful to him and DC Appleseed and these three dynamic board members for what they've achieved for district residents. So again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Che and team. And now let us recognize our board, without whom DC Appleseed's work would not be possible. The board members not only support our work financially, but they all work directly on the projects and guide our policy decisions about how best to advance the interests of those who live and work in the district.
We now come to our first award of the evening, the Ed Levin Democracy for DC Award. To present the award, please join me in welcoming Margot Aronson.
Thank you, Karen. I am Margot Aronson, and it is my pleasure to present this year's Ed Levin Democracy for DC Award. Ed Levin was a founding director of DC Appleseed, and he served on the board for 2 decades. He brought his insight, his strategic focus, and his irrepressible optimism, and helped to shape DC Appleseed's operating structure and its approach to the various systemic DC issues it addressed. Ed was very proud of DC Appleseed's accomplishments, and he took personal pride in having represented DC Appleseed on the district's Fair Vote project, a project that ultimately led to dramatic improvements in DC electoral procedures. Ed saw the vote as foundational, and he was fierce when it came to congressional representation denied to the district's 700,000 residents. That fierceness, that passion, led to the establishment of this award in his name, now in its 4th year. I'm very happy to present the 2021 Ed Levin Democracy for DC Award to 2 individuals who have made outstanding contributions to the fight for DC statehood and the push for true democracy for the district. First, Anise Jenkins. Anise Jenkins is a legendary figure in the fight for statehood. A district native, Anise grew up here, went to DC schools, graduated with a major in political science from Howard University, and then earned her master's in business administration, also at Howard. She became an activist in 1997 when Congress stripped the District of Columbia of its local powers. Not long after, she was arrested during a protest, and she met members of a grassroots group working on what would become Stand Up for Democracy in DC. Anise readily joined them, and with her energy and her ideas, was soon on the planning team. Together, they organized protest rallies and special events, wrote petitions, and reached out for the informal network of community support, and much, much more. Basically, they built an idea from the ground up into today's vibrant advocacy coalition. Anise became executive director of Stand Up in 2008, and she continues in that role today. She is recognized as a tireless community organizer and well known for her unwavering voice opposing negotiation or compromise on statehood for the district. And one more credential, she's now been arrested altogether 9 times while campaigning for greater DC democracy. Good trouble indeed. Anise, it is a huge honor to present you with this award. As an outstanding leader in the fight for democracy for the district, and as a role model, standing up for the 51st state.
Yes, I am really happy to receive this prestigious award from Appleseed, which is an organization who cares about DC human rights. I am so honored to receive this award along with Wade Henderson, who is now known for his advocacy of civil rights and human rights for DC. I can't say any further about receiving this award, but it is a true honor.
Thank you, Anise. Our second honoree this evening is Wade Henderson. Wade Henderson is a prominent commentator on civil rights and race relations in the United States and across the world. At the same time, he's well grounded here in the district, where he has been a leader speaking out for statehood and DC voting rights for years. A graduate of Howard University with a law degree from the Rutgers University School of Law, Wade is a member of the Bar of the District of Columbia and the Bar of the Supreme Court of the United States. Wade won praise and numerous awards during his 20 years as president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, especially for having strengthened the effectiveness of the coalition and steered the conference in the direction of emerging public policy issues of concern to the community. Other work in Wade's background includes special roles in the Washington area NAACP, the ACLU of the National Capital Area, and the Council on Legal Education Opportunity. And Wade served from 1999 until recently as the Joseph L. Rao Chair of Public Interest Law at the University of the District of Columbia, David A. Clark School of Law. And currently, while continuing his civil rights advisory work with nonprofit organizations through the firm Wade J. Henderson, LLC, Wade has also stepped up to lead the leadership conference once again, this time as interim president. Wade, this award is for all you have done and all you bring to the fight for democracy in DC. Thank you.
Thank you for that generous introduction, Margot. I'm deeply grateful to Walter Smith and the extraordinary staff and board at the DC Appleseed Center for Law and Justice for this incredible honor. I'm also especially pleased to receive it with my dear friend Anise Jenkins, who's been a longtime personal hero. This year marks the 245th anniversary of the founding of the Republic, a significant milestone on which we should take stock and begin to come to terms with the contradictions of who we say we are and who we actually are as a democracy. As a lifelong resident of Washington, D.C., and as a civil rights advocate, I believe this moment demands that our elected leaders remedy the profound injustice of denying statehood to D.C. residents. In our lifetime, we have never had anyone with the power of a real vote to represent us on Capitol Hill. For more than 200 years, we and hundreds of thousands of our neighbors have been mere spectators to our democracy. From a broader civil and human rights perspective, the disenfranchisement of DC residents stands out as the most blatant violation of the most important civil right that Americans have, and that is the right to vote. And it only perpetuates the underlying racial animus that has been present since the district's founding. We simply cannot be the democracy we say we are when the lives of more than 700,000 people are at the mercy of political whim. Our nation has made great progress through its history in expanding the right to vote. In the process, it has become a model for the world. Yet it remains painfully clear that the right to vote is meaningless if we cannot put anyone into office. Washingtonians have been deprived of this right for centuries, often on grounds that had absolutely nothing to do with constitutional design and everything to do with race. Until statehood is achieved, the efforts of the civil rights movement will remain incomplete. During this time of upheaval and uncertainty, I want to thank DC Appleseed and everyone joining us today for affirming our shared vision of a just and inclusive America and your incredible partnership in the efforts to secure statehood for DC's residents. Thank you for this incredible honor.
Thank you, Margot, Anise, and Wade. And now a word from our sponsors.
We are now pleased to welcome our entertainment for the evening, the very talented Duke Ellington School of the Arts show choir, Voices in Motion. Take it away.
$525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments so dear, 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, in laughter, in strife, in 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year in a life? How about love? How about love? How about love? Measuring love. Seasons of love. Seasons of love. 525,600 minutes, 525,000 journeys to land, 525,600 minutes. How do you measure the life of a woman or man?
True that she learned, or in times that he cried. Bridges he burned, on the way that she died.
It's time now to sing out, though the story never ends. Let's celebrate, remember a year in the life of friends. Remember the love. Remember the love. Remember the love. Measure in love. Seasons of love. Seasons of love. Seasons of love. 525,600 minutes. Seasons of love. 525,000 moments so dear. 525,600 minutes. Seasons of love. How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, in laughter, in strife, in 525,600 minutes. Seasons of love. Do you measure a year in the life? How about love? Remember the love. Remember the love. Measure in love.
Thank you, Duke Ellington School of the Arts. That was wonderful. Now, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Director Tommy Wells. He is a former council member representing Ward 6 and is now the director of the Department of Energy and Environment. He is a fierce environmental advocate for the district and will be speaking about the cleanup and restoration of the Anacostia River and the surrounding areas. DC Appleseed has been privileged to work with Director Wells for nearly 20 years, when he served on the council, when he served on the school board, and now as director of DOEE. We are glad to have him here tonight to bring us an update on the city's efforts to clean up the Anacostia River. Please welcome Director Wells.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm really honored to be here for this gala, this event. I believe that Appleseed has been with us for 27 years, and Appleseed has been around for my whole political career. I have been coached or sometimes admonished or cajoled or encouraged and cheered on by Walter for many years. And I'm really honored to be here and to speak to you for the gala. Also want to say how much I appreciate the work of Danielle and the work that she's done in partnership with us around the Anacostia River has really given Appleseed quite a presence and certainly an effective presence in working with us at the Department of Energy and Environment. I also have to say what an honor it is to be a speaker along with first Jamie Raskin. Congressman Raskin has been a hero of many of ours for his championship of autonomy for the district for statehood, but certainly over the past year, what he's confronted and also how he's led has really reinvigorated my faith in patriotism and what's possible and what should be expected of us. What a brilliant partner to have close to the district, and what a great advocate we have in Congressman Raskin. And then, of course, I know you've heard from Mary Che. Councilmember Che and I started on the council together and partnered on a number of initiatives. But I think that the tag team or partnership we have now with me as the director of the Department of an agency that she has responsibility for on the council, that we've done some pretty incredible things. We're the first LEED Platinum city in the world. We continue to show what's possible for the rest of the nation. And much of it has to do with Mary's leadership. And also, I can't not mention the Clean Energy Omnibus Bill. It was the first bill like it in the nation, and she shepherded it through, helped, create it, and that continues to be a great partnership as we address climate change as the nation's capital, and really provide leadership and a model for what's possible across the nation, if not other cities of the world. And then a quick shout out to Anise Jenkins. Stand Up for Democracy in DC. Anise has been certainly at every rally, every march that I've been in to stand up for democracy in DC. And kudos to Appleseed for acknowledging her at this gala. Again, and all of the worthy awardees, but in particular, I wanted to give a shout out for Anise, who's been there with all of us in the struggle for our right to vote and full participation in our own government. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Anacostia River. When I first was appointed by Muriel Bowser to her cabinet to lead, at that time, the Department of the Environment, one of the earliest meetings I had was with representatives from the board and advisors to Appleseed, along with Walter, of course, to talk about our role in cleaning up the Anacostia River and the urgency for cleaning up the Anacostia River. Appleseed has made this one of your priority projects for, I believe, going on 20 years. And I want to acknowledge you for that, but also acknowledge the support over just the past 2 years or so in helping us get to a milestone, which is the interim record of decision. That this is a river that Appleseed and your not just your board, but your stakeholders and our city recognizes that it has been a symbol for environmental injustice and for social injustice. That this is a river that was our industrial highway, where we did things that other cities did. We stacked our coal there. We stored oil tanks there. We stored gasoline and diesel in large tanks along the river. And we did a number of things, including this is where at Poplar Point, where the architect of the Capitol had a nursery there. DC, at that time, the agency of the federal government had a plantings nursery there. They used DDT, they used chlordane to a high level. And then just going up north of the river, probably one of the greatest symbols of environmental injustice. It was the city dump. City dump was a federal dump. It received debris, toxic waste from the Pentagon all the way through other federal agencies and the city itself. And it became a smoldering, as they do, as we see in other developing countries. It was just a smoldering pile of debris and garbage. And of course, the constant smoke would waft over some of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, causing respiratory problems, health problems. And then one day, a little boy named Kevin did what little boys do. He was out playing, and he was playing on one of the mounds at the dump with some friends. And he tripped and rolled into a pit that was still smoldering and on fire, and he burned to death. And that death gave the opportunity for our local advocates newspaper to say, it is time to close this dump. And the dump right there on the Anacostia River, of course, it would rain, wash bad stuff into the river. And to close the dump was the first step. Next step was to cover it with fill, with dirt. And now we're working with the Park Service to where 2/3 of, it's now called Kenilworth Park, 2/3 of Kenilworth Park will be transferred to the District of Columbia. And then we'll go back into the fill that they used and remediate that, along with the 1/3 that the Park Service is doing as well. And that will happen over the next year and a half. And so that's still being remediated. But also we had the Pepco power plant, and at a time when PCBs were used as part of a mixture to cool equipment, and the PCBs, of course, have leaked, spilled, and have gone into the river and has impacted fish, wildlife, and of course, humans in the consumption, the uptake through the biota and into fish in the food chain to us. And so we've seen pictures over the years of fish degraded and the impact of that. So the Anacostia River is a symbol, but it's also a living organism, and it's a living support of many things, besides just the natural environment, but also the hopes and vision that one day it would be a contributing asset for the residents, again, of the district, to where we could swim, fish, eat the fish, and it'd be also an economic engine rather than a place to avoid. And I'm proud to say that under Mayor Bowser, we're getting there. We are well on our way. As many of you know, the sediment was one of the areas that we have to clean up, and the sediment carries all the legacies of toxins and pollutants that I just went over with you. And we have to clean that up. The river bottom, the sediment, is owned by the Park Service, the water by the people, the residents of the District of Columbia. So we're inextricably tied to each other. So in partnership with the Park Service and the district, using money appropriated by Mayor Bowser and the mayors before her, we have characterized what's in there, and we've characterized a plan of how to clean it up. It's called the interim record of decision. It was adopted in place September 20th of 2020. We stakeholders contributed mightily to getting it to this point. We're not the only city in the country that has a degraded river running through it, but we've moved quicker than almost any city in the country to getting to a plan for cleanup. And so we've spent, again, at least $20 million characterizing what needs to be done. And the money is currently there for moving forward with remediation. Still, it takes a while. We still have federal approvals. It's under what's called a CERCLA process, which is under the Clean Water Act for the country. We're moving along. It's we wish we could move faster, but we'll definitely be in the riverbed by 2023, cleaning it up, the hot spots, and then we'll measure. As even with the sediment not being remediated yet, the river's getting cleaner, and it's cleaner for a lot of reasons. We've got a $2.7 billion tunnel project to end the overflows of sewage from the combined sewer overflow problem. And the first 7 miles have already opened up, and more than 80% of all rain events are collected in the in the tunnels below, so that it doesn't overflow. And then by 2023, the next leg will be opened up, and we'll be catching at least 90% of all rain events. Along with the Department of Energy and the Environment has rewilded almost every single stream in the district that is on the District of Columbia property. Now we're working with the Park Service to rewild those streams as well, so they act in the way that they should, as filters to the water. We've banned styrofoam. We've ended we put a fee on plastic bags. We've got more work to do on other plastics and such, but the amount of trash in the river has been reduced substantially. Doesn't mean we still have more work to do, because we do, but we've made a lot of progress. If you look at pictures of the Anacostia River 50 years ago, you just see kind of red clay. You don't see that much green infrastructure, and just, a constant mud stream into the river. Now we have clearer days. We have days actually when the water is swimmable, and we're moving towards a time to where that will be the majority of the days. Our fish consumption advisories have gotten less rigid, or certainly less restrictive, that more and more the fish that we catch out of the river are edible and safe. And so we certainly have fish that are anadromous, that go out and gather pollution and PCBs in other places and then bring it back, and that's the rockfish. But the fish that stay in the area, the catfish and smallmouth bass and some others, they're getting a lot cleaner. And so our efforts are paying off. And I think that everyone's advocacy that's been a part of this should be very proud that we have become stewards of what was once one of the 10 most compromised, dirtiest rivers in America. And we have made incredible progress. Now, we also are continuing to do more. We've taken Kingman Island. We're creating an urban environmental education center there. The mayor's allocated $4.5 million to make that happen. That's now a conservation area for the district. It's the first conservation area designated by a mayor ever in DC. And we also launched our Green Boats program. Green Boats, where people actually have lined up in order to get one of our green kayaks or green canoes and go out and pick trash off the riverbanks. That's been fun to get people out on the water and participate in that. We're employing people with our Kingman Rangers program. We're certainly engaging all up and down the river in what has become part of the vision of when Anthony Williams first created the Anacostia Watershed Corporation, that it really is becoming an economic engine, an asset for the city, and a place where we can be proud of. I think I want to end on kind of the symbol of what's possible. We're doing all this hardscape remediation. We're doing gray water, green infrastructure. But the thing that's been most gratifying to me as your director of the Department of Energy and the Environment is, and something I didn't really anticipate, and that's the degree to which nature is doing its part. We're on our 7th generation of eagles that are nesting at the Arboretum on the banks of the Anacostia River. And they have had successful fledglings, of course, into 7 generations. And they are feeding almost exclusively off the Anacostia River. I realize that we have osprey, we have beavers coming back, we have otter, we have a lot, but this is a symbol for the nation. And as you know, we were down to 500 nesting pairs in the country before we were able to turn this around. Anacostia River is a symbol for what's possible, that when we all get together and take a concerted effort for cleaning and protecting one of our natural assets, nature will come in and do its part too. And that's where we are. So thank you for inviting me. Very proud to be in a community with Appleseed and the work that you do. You have probably one of the best lineups of law firms that anyone could dream of having behind you. And I appreciate your help, your support, your encouragement. And thank you for inviting me to be one of your speakers this evening.
Thank you, Director Wells.
And thank you to the foundations who support the work of DC Appleseed. Now, please welcome back Voices in Motion.
Love you madly, right or wrong. Sounds like the lyrics of a song. But since it's so, I thought you ought to know. I love you madly. Better fish are in the sea. It's not the theory for me. And that's for sure, just like I said before. I love you madly. If you could see the happy you and me, I dream about so proudly. You know the breath of spring that makes me sing my love song so loudly. Good things come to those who wait. So just relax and wait for fate. So let me see the day you say to me, I love you madly. I love you
And now, another word from our sponsors.
I am now delighted to introduce my fellow DC Appleseed board member, Jeffrey Handwerker, who will be presenting the Arnold and Porter Community Service Award. Jeffrey and his pro bono team at Arnold and Porter have been instrumental in advancing DC Appleseed's long-term care project. This work seeks to improve the conditions of employment for individuals who work in long-term care, and specifically home health aides, who are primarily women and people of color. Please join me in welcoming Jeffrey.
Hi, everyone. Claudia Schlossberg and Judy Levy have been essential in helping to make the district government support the direct care healthcare workforce. They have educated stakeholders, sent letters, made phone calls, organized meetings, made connections, and quite simply banged the drum the loudest in getting the Nurse Education Enhancement Act passed in the most recent DC budget. This extraordinary act provides training dollars to home health aides and certified nursing assistants, and creates a career pathway at the University of the District of Columbia so these workers can continue their education. Arnold and Porter is pleased to honor these two dedicated and inspired advocates on long-term care issues with the DC Appleseed Community Service Award. First, to Judy Levy. Judy Levy currently serves as the coordinator of the District of Columbia Coalition on Long-Term Care. All of us are beneficiaries of Judy's tireless work on behalf of essential healthcare workers who support older and disabled residents who need support doing the basic things many of us often take for granted, like getting dressed, making meals, and emptying the garbage. Ms. Levy is a graduate of the University of Michigan School of Public Health with a master's in health services administration. She has over 40 years of experience in healthcare service delivery in-home and community-based programs that serve low-income residents. Among her many professional achievements is she is the former chair of the Montgomery County Commission on Aging. She has developed the best practice training programs, worked with the DC Board of Nursing to develop a medication assistant program, and has been a champion advocate to make direct support healthcare jobs more respected and better paid. It has been my honor to work with Judy directly for the past several years on these initiatives. Congratulations, Judy.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and the DC Appleseed for this award and your ongoing support over many years. I must pay homage to Vera Mayer, who started the Long-Term Care Coalition in 1995. Her concept was clear: bring together advocates, providers, consumers, and government agencies. We have continued this model and it works. There is no fee to belong, just a desire to participate in activities to improve services to the DC community. None of our work would be successful without the volunteer members who work with us. In addition, Iona Senior Service Management and Board continues to support our efforts. Our focus on the workforce has never wavered. Yes, we still believe that quality jobs mean quality care. And so a major focus has been the direct care providers, no matter where they provide services. Thank you again for this award.
And now to Claudia Schlossberg. Claudia is currently a principal at Castle Hill Consulting. Claudia's business card may say consultant on it, but it would be more accurate if it said catalyst. For the last 2 years, she has been nothing short of a dynamo, engaging everyone from elected leaders and agency directors to college deans and every imaginable long-term care, healthcare stakeholder building worker training programs and pipelines of workers serving elders and the disabled. Claudia has a JD from Antioch School of Law and a BA from Union College. Over the course of her over 30-year career, she has become an expert in Medicaid, Medicare, health policy, operations and reimbursement, federal regulation, legislative advocacy, grassroots organizing, legislative and regulatory drafting, long-term care, and pharmaceuticals. To describe Claudia as the go-to person on these issues would be a gross understatement. Claudia has been the Senior Deputy Director of Medicaid at the Department of Healthcare Finance. She is chair of the District of Columbia Coalition for Long-Term Care Workforce Development Subcommittee and sits on the board of directors of Leading Age DC and Iona Senior Services. Claudia, congratulations.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and thanks to the members of the board of DC Appleseed and all of those who are assembled this evening. I am both honored and humbled to receive this recognition, particularly as I'm sharing this platform tonight, not only with my stalwart colleague and partner in advocacy, Judy Levy, but with so many distinguished and esteemed longtime leaders in the fight for DC statehood and voting rights and racial equality. I am a very proud 42-year resident of the District of Columbia, and as you heard, a graduate of Antioch Law School, the precursor of the University of the District of Columbia, David A. Clark School of Law. I have spent many, many years in the district in various capacities working to improve quality and access to health and support services for older adults and people with disabilities. Today, as you've heard, across all sectors of our economy, but particularly in healthcare and in long-term care, we face a critical shortage of trained and qualified workers. Thanks to Judy, I have been privileged to chair the DC Coalition for Long-Term Care Subcommittee on Workforce Development, a coalition that includes provider associations, employers, consumers, advocates, including your own Neil Richardson, who has provided been a great resource for us for this past year and continuing. Last year, with leadership from Councilmember Elisa Silverman on the DC Council, we succeeded in supporting passage of the Nurse Education Enhancement Act. And as you've heard, this is a law that provides funding for training of district residents to become home health aides and certified nurse aides, and creates a pathway to allow them to continue their education in nursing careers for no charge through the University of the District of Columbia. We are working on many other healthcare workforce initiatives with partnerships with the Rodham Institute, with Friendship Public Charter School, with Academy of Hope, and many others. And so in accepting this award, as Judy has said, we're not doing this alone. The work involves many individuals. And so in recognition of the hard work of our coalition partners, again, thank you so much for this recognition. And we have much work yet to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and congratulations to Judy and Claudia. I am now so pleased to introduce Congressman Jamie Raskin. Congressman Raskin proudly represents Maryland's 8th Congressional District. He is a longtime friend of DC Appleseed and has been a staunch supporter of DC democracy. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee, the Committee on Oversight and Reform, the Committee on House Administration, the Rules Committee, and the Coronavirus Select Subcommittee. DC Appleseed has worked with Congressman Raskin for over 20 years, beginning with the first DC voting rights lawsuit we worked on together, and on the DC Voting Rights Bill. We also appreciated his support for DC Appleseed's successful efforts to establish an elected DC Attorney General and to pass a local DC budget autonomy law. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Jamie Raskin.
Hello, everyone. It's Congressman Jamie Raskin, your friend and neighbor from Maryland's beautiful 8th Congressional District. That's Montgomery, Frederick, and Carroll counties. I'm delighted to be with everybody at the Gala for DC Appleseed. I have known DC Appleseed for 20 years and have gotten to work with Walter Smith and your fantastic team for a long time. I know you do a lot of great work to make life better on a daily basis for people in Washington, D.C., and I salute you on that. But I've gotten to work especially with DC Appleseed on all the questions of statehood, political empowerment, equal rights, and trying to vindicate the long struggle for people in DC to be on an equal plane of democratic equality with people all across the country. So the argument for DC statehood, of course, is now more important and more urgent than ever. It was never tolerable to disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of tax-paying, draftable American citizens. It was never consistent with democratic practices around the world, where no other country disenfranchises the residents of the capital city. But now we are in a democratic emergency. The people of Washington and the police officers and the Capitol officers who live in Washington came to our aid on January 6th when we were under attack by fascist insurrectionists who tried to overthrow the 2020 presidential election and plunge us into some kind of authoritarian chaos. You stood by us then. Democracy is still under attack. And Tocqueville said that democracy in America is always either expanding and growing, or it's shrinking and shriveling away. And we know that there are forces in America that want democracy to shrink and to shrivel away. But we need to make sure that democracy keeps moving. And at the very top of that list has got to be statehood for 713,000 American citizens who live right in the shadow of the Capitol. So, it's been a very important part of my work on the House Judiciary Committee and as a member of the Maryland delegation to galvanize the Maryland delegation to be strong supporters of statehood and to get everybody on the House Judiciary Committee who's got an open ear and an open heart and an open mind to understand it and to feel the importance of it. And I am proud to say that I got to work with Eleanor Holmes Norton to build victories, two back-to-back victories for DC statehood in the House of Representatives, losing, I think, only one Democratic vote over those two tries. And unfortunately, we didn't get any Republican votes, but that's a statement about the Republican Party and not about the justice of this cause. So my days with Appleseed go back to the beginning, to Alexander versus Daley, where we confronted the disenfranchisement head on, saying that it collided with the equal protection, one person, one vote principle. It collided with due process. It was at odds with the history, since people in DC could vote for the first decade after Congress took control over the area that's now the District of Columbia. Still, people could continue to vote. In those days, it was as part of Maryland. And it was at odds with the basic structure and spirit of the Constitution. Unfortunately, as you'll remember, we lost that one 2-1, but all praise to Judge Oberdorfer, who wrote a beautiful dissenting opinion there. And I've worked with DC Appleseed over the years in the 2009 effort to grant DC voting rights in the House that was stopped by the Second Amendment gun rights extremists. And I have favored and championed, even where I couldn't work on directly, all of your work on local budget autonomy for DC. And your work pushing the statehood initiative and statehood constitution in Washington. But in any event, I want you to know what you do know, which is you have an ally in me. You've got a close friend and an admiring friend in the representative from Maryland's 8th Congressional District. So keep up the great work, Appleseed. Congratulations on another great year of working for the people of Washington. And let's have these legislative and political breakthroughs we need to get full equality, justice, and democratic rights for the people of Washington.
Thank you, Congressman Raskin, and thank you all for watching our gala.
If you've been inspired by the gala and you would like to donate to DC Appleseed, you can do so online via our website, dcappleseed.com, or by sending us a check. There'll be further details at the end of our show.
Our work is only made possible by the generosity of incredible supporters and community partners. We are proud of the achievements in 2021, and with your help and support, we can achieve even more in 2022.
And now, to close the gala, please welcome back the Duke Ellington School of the Arts show choir, Voices in Motion. Thank you and good night.
Everybody look around, cause there's a reason to rejoice, you see. Everybody come out, then let's commence to singing joyfully.
Everybody look up and feel the hope that we've been looking for. Everybody be glad, because our silent fear and dread is gone.
Freedom is he, has got a heart singing so joyfully. Just look about, you owe it to yourself to check it out. Can't you feel a brand new day? 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 Woo! Everybody be glad, because the sun is shining just for us. Everybody wake up into the morning and so happiness. Hello world, it's like a different way of living now. Thank you world, I always knew that we'd be free somehow. In harmony, show the world that we've got liberty. It's such a change.